What's going on, everybody? It's Nick Kosko with On3 Sports. Got a very special guest today, my guy Brandon Bell, former Penn State linebacker, kind of to join me to talk today pretty much about everything in college football, of course, Penn State including. That's where we're going to start out, man. Brandon, thanks for joining me. As always, good to talk to you again. Penn State, man, this is a year where 2023, there's high expectations. Obviously, there's going to be a new quarterback, so we'll get into that a little bit as well. But James Franklin, your former coach, seems to be very high on what this team can accomplish in 2023. Obviously won 10 games last year, but now they're probably thinking Big Ten title here for the first time. And, you know, we're approaching roughly around 7-8 years now since the last time they actually won the conference. So what are your first impressions of the spring practice, the spring period here for Penn State in 2023?
No, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for making me feel old. 7-8 years since that last Big Ten chip, my senior year. So definitely time flies, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing from out of the Penn State spring practice, winter training. The guys are suited up, full pads, full contact now. I'm just seeing the videos and everything in that nature. I'm excited, man. As always, I'm excited for the defense, but as you alluded to, all eyes are on the quarterback, the prize position with the new young guy looking to get his first chance.
Yeah, Drew Allar is that guy who got some playing time last year as well in place of a banged-up Sean Clifford. Of course, I feel like Sean Clifford was there forever, but he was a very stalwart guy at the quarterback position for Penn State. But Bo Pribula, is the other guy who's another sophomore, kind of he's a different type of quarterback from Allar, but again, this is a decision now that Franklin has yet to make, and he's not going to make this decision too early. But I think a lot of people assumed that Drew Allar was going to be the guy here in 2023. What have you heard? What have you seen? And at least what do you make of Drew Allar based on what you saw last season? He was a 5-star for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, just what I seen last season. He looked very comfortable in his minimum exposure out there. I think it was the Iowa game might have been the first look. QB went down and he kind of stepped in right before half, I think it was, and Cliff went down and he looked very comfortable. That's all I could say. He sat in the pocket, made some throws. As you said, he's not exactly the most mobile quarterback, but he's a big guy, almost like a Ben Roethlisberger, huge guy, hard to bring down, and he can move around a little bit. But the biggest thing I saw was his pocket presence. And he's got some good accuracy. He's a bigger guy, so he's going to have to get that trajectory down a little bit. But I'm sure those are all the things he's been working on. And we'll see. Training camp comes, summer training camp. That's when the real competition will kind of be dealt and a decision will be made then. But if I know Coach Franklin, he's going to let that ride out, let those guys compete at every position just to bring out the best and have the best product out there on that first Saturday.
Based on your experiences with Coach Franklin and his quarterback history at Penn State, you've had guys like Sean Clifford, you've had guys like Trace McSorley, Christian Hackenberg has obviously been some of the recent run of quarterbacks at Penn State. Everyone seems to be able to run. McSorley was more of a guy who was more of a dual threat quarterback. Clifford could run, but as you mentioned before, Drew Allar, not the most mobile guy when it comes to just taking off and running, but he obviously can move despite his big stature. But when you look at the quarterback position, does Franklin like the more RPO style type of quarterback, or would he like his offense to be molded around a guy like Allar who can stand back in the pocket? He's all of 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is, and just deliver 50-yard bombs down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can't go wrong. Obviously, in college football today, really transitioning to the NFL as well, you got to be able to move back there. You can't be a statue. And I don't think Allar is a statue. I'm not saying that, but the more athletic you can be at literally every position in football, the better the team will be, and most coaches like that. So that's always a thing. But when you got a prototypical looking QB back there, I mean, you can't teach size. So that's always a beautiful thing as well. And I'm excited to see what he can do. I mean, I love to see a guy sit back there and get into his weapons downfield, because I'm excited to see this receiving core step up as well. There's a lot of talent back there. A lot of names. I think guys want to get their name out there a little bit more, and I think they have the talent to do so.
So it's a young, but also a team that also has a couple of veterans on both sides of the ball as well. So when you look at the Big Ten as a whole, and a lot of people are just going to say it's Ohio State and it's Michigan, because that's been the battle over the last couple of seasons. And obviously with Michigan coming out on top of the Buckeyes finally under Jim Harbaugh. But again, because it seems like it's going to be those two teams again, I mean, is this a Big Ten or bust type of year for James Franklin? Obviously, people did not appreciate the way Penn State kind of fell down in 2021, but they bounced back and won 10 games last year. And again, the only two losses were to Ohio State and Michigan during the regular season. So it seems like it's those three teams, or maybe Ohio State and Michigan in either order at 1 and 2, and then Penn State's that third team, but they just happen to play all play in the same division. So what do you make of these expectations now on Penn State here in 2023?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's Big Ten or bust. What I will say is that the expectations are just as high as they've always been and always will be. Obviously, like you mentioned, those two teams are the front runners in the division and the conference itself. And hey, we're still in the fight to gain that level of competition or experience as those guys have when there's back and forth Big Ten champs. So I think we're fighting to get in that elite status, and that's the expectation for me. At least when it comes to every season, I want to be in that conversation as a Penn State football team with those three or those two universities. So I think that's the fight, and it's not going to come in one season. It's going to come after a few seasons when we knock those guys off. And as I said, the expectation is just as high as any other year. So this is a year that we got to get those two, and as well as everyone else. I don't want to get those two games and then fall off to a lesser opponent just because. So we're fighting to get in that elite status. That's the pressure that I feel, or that I want for the team, is getting that elite status of the Big Ten and to eventually compete for national championship.
Right. Franklin has done it before, winning the Big Ten. Obviously, you were on that team as well. Big Ten champs is a big deal. Now, another big deal was winning the Rose Bowl last year, but a guy like Ryan Day over at Ohio State, he previously said a couple of years ago, they won the Rose Bowl. They beat Utah, epic game just a couple of years ago, but they basically, they didn't get too riled up in a celebration. They were like, well, we want to win national championships. We want to get to the college football playoff and compete for national titles. And they got back to the CFP this past season, fell short to Georgia, the eventual national champs. So when you see Penn State win a Rose Bowl last year, now, whether you're on that team or you're an alum like yourself, is that Rose Bowl something to celebrate? Can James Franklin and the Penn State football team celebrate a big Rose Bowl victory like how it used to mean? Or is it, well, it was the Rose Bowl, but it wasn't in the college football playoff this year? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not going to diminish the victory. As Coach Franklin would say, he always said, and as I've learned in life and through football as well, you take every win as you get it. You're not going to diminish the victory because it doesn't hold as much status as it once did. Hey, this is how the season went. These kids, the coaches are here to win football games, and that's what they did. So congratulations. And kind of going back to the expectations for the next season, obviously, we want to be in that playoff contention to get to the national championship. But, that road starts with everyone on the schedule and those two universities that we mentioned before. So, you got to move everything one step at a time, one day at a time, practice, game, week, and see where the cards fall. But taking care of business, winning games on Saturdays and Rose Bowl, granddaddy of them all. It's a beautiful thing no matter what. It's a college football experience. I was happy for those guys. Obviously, my last game ended out on the wrong end of the stick in the Rose Bowl. So it was a beautiful sight, great component, and great competition in Utah. And it was a great game. Glad to see those guys end up on top.
For sure. So college football as a whole now, it's really wild. People over the last 2 years now have said it's the Wild West now with the transfer portal rules. Obviously, NIL has taken this sport and basically all college sports by storm at this point. So with the transfer portal window actually reopening in just a couple of days from now, we're recording this on April 12th. So April 15th, it reopens. And so basically spring practice ends or is about to end, and then the portal floodgates open up once again. So it was different even a little less than 10 years ago when you were in college. Obviously, when I was in college too, just covering this from a student's perspective, the transfer portal back then was basically you transfer once, you might get granted immediate eligibility. There were grad transfers, but with the COVID waiver, everyone got an extra year. So you see these 6-year guys that normally wouldn't have been 6-year guys without, maybe a couple injuries throughout their college career. So what are your general thoughts on the way this transfer portal thing has opened up over the last couple of years with, we'll get into NIL in a second too, but the portal has basically just been turned into NFL free agency for the most part. Maybe not for all guys, but if I think for a majority of the cases, it's basically free agency now.
Yeah, and it is. There's no arguing that. It's basically free agency. And the same in NFL free agency as it is in college football, transfer portal agency, whatever you want to call it. It's not going to benefit everyone. Some people are going to lose out in a situation. Some people, as the big names, the big stories we see, are going to gain from it. So it's definitely something I like and appreciate, because there's so many college teams, there's so many players on a college team, and I understand a guy wanting to get a better look to compete and be out there in the field, and that can happen in a different situation, as we see it every year. But obviously, guys do have to be careful. I would suggest really digging deep and talking with your family and the coaches, and really kind of figuring out if that's exactly what you want to do, and then finding the right situation. You can't just go anywhere just to go somewhere because you wanted to. I think there's a strategic kind of mindset you have to have with that. But I enjoy it. I think it's good for the sport. Obviously, there's going to be some losses and there's going to be some wins, and we'll see how it is critiqued and maybe changed up in the next few years. But I'm here for it.
Do you think there should be some kind of regulation on it? And this has to do with NIL now at this point, because you see big schools, maybe a school like Penn State, you see the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Michigans, all the basically a Big Ten and SEC, and then throw in a couple other Power 5 schools that have these huge collectives, these huge donor bases. They have the ability to do more than just say, this is your local car dealership in, let's just say, Gainesville, Florida. So come play for the Florida Gators. No, they have collectives, they have donors that are willing to just funnel in money. Do you think there should be a cap on that, at least in how much money can be dished out, or the regulations behind in terms of rules where no, the NIL deals have to come from businesses and not necessarily donors? Donors donate to the program. They don't necessarily donate to a pool of money that can be used to essentially, quote unquote, buy recruits. I don't want to say anybody's buying anything because, you don't have the inside information right there. But what are your thoughts on rules and regulations of how NIL factors into recruiting?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there should be some rules and regulations, and I think they'll come, as this is a totally new venture in the great sport of college football. And yeah, I kind of like that idea. Maybe you, as an NFL, you cap it out per season. I'm not sure how they regulate that, but every year the university and each team, or maybe just the team, has a certain cap on how much money they can bring in for that year, because that may limit the amount of recruits, or I don't want to call them free agents, transfer portal guys that you can bring, and it kind of just regulates it. You don't want a whole boatload of money over here for 1 year and then kind of not sure where that's all going, and kind of keeping track of it all. I think that may help that. So I would agree with the rules and regulations, and I believe they'll come, as we don't want it to be the true wild, wild west in college football. But I do like that it's different from every level is different. You don't want it to be a strict NFL type style. You want college football to keep its essence, but also evolve. This is going to the year 2023. And it's just every year I expect something different. We got freaking USC and UCLA coming to the Big Ten. I love it. It's something new, and I just got to get used to it.
Yeah, for sure. So I use this example only because maybe it's a bigger story maybe in the Olympic sports, where, I've seen it in wrestling now, where there are athletes that are highly successful at big institutions. So one case that just comes to mind is Aaron Nagao. He has 3 years of eligibility left. He wrestled for Minnesota, was an All-American, but he entered the transfer portal seemingly out of nowhere. And the speculation is it has something to do with NIL, whether it's going to be a Penn State, a Cornell, an Iowa, or even going back to Minnesota. It seems like he's testing his value in terms of how much money can a school, can a collective, can businesses give him to wrestle for an institution, an educational institution. Now, I think that's where the lines are now blurred, and that's that gray area. So what do you think about that? Whether it's wrestling, whether it's football, basketball, any other Olympic sport as well. What do you make of guys, or even female athletes, using their brand, their name recognition to test the quote unquote free agent waters even with many years of eligibility, and they even graduate yet.
Yeah, I definitely understand from a university or a fan's standpoint where you'd hate to see a guy or a girl leave. But from the player's standpoint, I have to get on side with that because the window of college sports is a small window in your life from 18 to 20, normally 23, 22, right? Once we phase out of this COVID year type of extension. So you got to maximize that. And as we see time and time again in any sport, you could be a great college athlete and it doesn't necessarily transition into professional or Olympic. So I have to be on the side of a guy or girl maximizing their value, their brand in a small 4 to 5 years of their life to hopefully set up the rest of their life. If they can, monetize it in a way to do so. And then hopefully, yeah, they go on to have a great professional career, but we know the percentages of those. So a guy or girl coming out of college with a little bump in their bank account to set up their life, getting to their next phase of their career, I have to stand behind it. I get it's tricky, and this is maybe where the rules and regulations can come in. Maybe you cap off a transfer, one transfer. I don't know. I also agree. I don't like seeing guys and girls transfer 2-3 times over a span of 2 years. And I get you're trying to find the right spot, but I agree that doesn't have the best look as far as going professional and that nature. But I have to get on the side of those guys and girls maximizing their brand.
Brandon Bell, former Penn State linebacker, with me here on On3 Sports. And Brandon, I mean, over at On3, we use the NIL valuation metrics and charts, and it's a fascinating new tool. Which is, I mean, basically for us, it's still in its infancy, and I'm still trying to figure out how It's all calculated. And there's a lot of nitty gritty details, but to me, it's a fascinating tool for these athletes to really figure out, a rough estimation or a close estimation as to what their brand could actually be. Now, back when you were in college, these options weren't actually available. So take me back to your days when you were getting recruited, out of South Jersey, and Penn State came knocking and they offered you a scholarship. So most people would say, well, the scholarship should be enough for these student athletes. But if you had the opportunity, wouldn't you, either you would choose Penn State or would you even choose somewhere else that said, well, we can offer you a scholarship, but also this business, and this business want to sponsor you as their name brand athlete, and you're going to get money on top of that. People are critical of that. Some people are so critical of that. What would you say to those critics?
I understand the criticism. But as the world is, it's not black and white. Maybe for me, when Penn State came knocking, I'm going to value and evaluate everything, the future, education, the alumni status, as well as obviously playing football and hopefully moving on to the professional level. So all those things, all those criteria come into a decision for a 17, 16-year-old kid is already tough enough. And every kid has a different background. Some kids may, as we know, very much need a little bump in their bank account going into college. Yes, the scholarship is a great, earned, lump of money to go to a university and get your education. But as we said, a lot of these guys, even with the education, you get out of college and you're still kind of flat on your bum. If you don't make it pro, which the percentages are very low, even if you make it pro, I made it pro as an undrafted rookie with a $5,000 signing bonus. And in retrospect, there's not much to really get you. It's enough, but it's not much to get your life started. So I have to get behind the idea of it and understand that it can be tricky, as far as kind of the free agency of it and who can do this and who can do that. But I believe kids are going to make their decision based off individual preferences, and obviously money has to do with it. But I think the donors, that's something the university and the donors have to figure out.
Absolutely. I feel like it's going to get a little bit more wilder over the next couple of years before rules, regulations, or maybe just a standard way of going about it comes into play. Let's say over the next 5 to 10 years, then it'll become the norm. So Brandon Bell, former Penn State linebacker, joining me right here on On3 Sports. Brandon, what are you doing now? Tell the public where they can find you, of course, on social media, all that good stuff. What are you up to now?
Yep. You can find me Twitter and Instagram at __B Bell. That's first initial, last name. And I'm currently moving into media space as you are. And actually I have a new venture with a partner of mine, speaking on NIL, Act Sports. It's a new kind of sports agency. We're looking to help develop those brands of young high school and college athletes. Get them the marketing deal, boost their brand in the small window that they have as a college athlete, and hopefully, we build success. And it's a new venture just starting up, but we're looking to start, the South Jersey area and expand to all our networks and, help these guys boost their brand.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Brandon Bell, thanks for joining me, man. Good to talk to you once again. Hopefully we can do it again soon as the season approaches. And, hopefully for your sake, Penn State is highly competitive and in that top 10 ranking all season long and maybe competing for another Big Ten title.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Brandon Bell with me on On3 Sports.